It was said to have happened 1,000 years later, yet Frey Raon, the one who succeeded the fallen hero, still struggled to understand the impact of starlight on the world. Even now, he often wondered if the path he had chosen that day, guided by a glimpse of the future, had truly been the right one. The story began with Frey handing his sword to the Demon King. The Demon King, a woman of commanding presence, regarded him with a cold smile and asked if he had finished settling matters, had now come to offer even his weapon. She remarked that, thanks to him, the true demons had no purpose left to serve. With a tone of mockery, she accused him of joining her to destroy the world while pretending to be a hero, turning against his own family and friends in an act of betrayal that had no precedent. Frey responded with a faint smile, saying it was an honor to be acknowledged by her. She gently tilted his chin upward, her expression sharp. "Do you really think this is praise?" she asked. Continuing, she observed that for someone who would make such choices, the outcome was unsurprising. She assured him that, as promised, she would make him her subordinate. Frey, keeping his composure, thanked her and stated that this had been the only path left to him. The Demon King, her demeanor unchanged, mentioned that her army had likely already dealt with any remaining opposition. She noted that the world's end was now inevitable. Later, Frey was seen sitting alone, his head lowered as he reflected on the state of the world. He spoke softly to himself about how familiar places were falling apart and how the people he cared about had suffered because of his actions. A flashback showed an encounter with Kanya, a sorcerer with dark magic. She asked Frey if harming everyone in the mansion had brought him any sense of peace. Tears streamed down her face as she admitted regret for her inability to stop him. Holding a dagger to her side, she declared that she would watch over him as he faced the consequences of his choices. She made her decision and collapsed to the floor, leaving Frey standing there in silence. The scene shifted to a battlefield where Irina Filiard, a red-haired Grand Mage, fought valiantly despite being injured. Arrows lodged in her shoulder, she pushed through the pain, lamenting the relentless onslaught of the Demon King's army. She expressed frustration that no matter how hard she fought, it seemed endless. Irina remarked that if sacrificing her life could stop the world's destruction, it would be a small price to pay. Seeing Frey amidst the chaos, she demanded to know why a hero like him was leading the enemy. With sorrow in her eyes, she conjured a powerful spell and called herself a fool for ever believing in him. In a final act of defiance, she unleashed her magic, engulfing the area in light. The narrative then moved to a castle. A young woman lay unconscious on the floor, surrounded by monstrous creatures. Her fate, like many others, had been sealed in the wake of Frey's choices. For 1,000 years, the Empire had stood strong against foreign invaders, never yielding. Yet, Princess Klana Solar Sunshine couldn't fathom that it would ultimately fall at the hands of the one she had trusted the most. With hatred burning in her eyes, she confronted Frey Raon Starlight. Her voice trembled with emotion as she declared that even as he rotted away, his name would remain etched in her heart as the most despicable person she had ever known. Frey, his expression cold and unyielding, silenced her words as he dealt the final blow. Her blood splattered onto his face, marking the end of her defiance. The scene shifted to a burning church where Saintess Philocastel had knelt in prayer, clutching a cross tightly in her hands. She whispered thanks to the heavens, her voice laced with bitterness. Through Frey's actions, she had come to believe that God had abandoned them. As Frey pushed open the doors of the church, Philok stood to face him. Her voice, filled with sorrow and conviction, broke the silence. She no longer addressed him as a hero, but as Frey, vowing that even in death she would ensure God knew the full extent of his deeds. The narrative transitioned to a blazing fortress, humanity's last stronghold. A woman's voice echoed through the chaos. It was Serena Luna Moonlight, the Empire's genius prime minister. She spoke calmly despite the raging fires, recounting how she had suppressed her emotions, meticulously calculated the Demon King army's movements, and questioned every decision she made. Yet, as Frey approached, her composure wavered. With a soft smile and tears streaming down her face, she admitted there was one thing she had never been able to predict: her lingering feelings for him. Before she could say more, a giant burning rock struck her, ending her life as blood stained the ground. Frey, standing amidst the devastation, reflected on his actions. His voice was cold and detached as he concluded that he had willingly become a villain because it was necessary. The Demon King's laughter echoed echoed through the crumbling surroundings. She mocked the absurdity of a hero and a demon king joining forces, declaring that once the sword was destroyed, everything would end. At that moment, Frey raised his head, his expression unreadable. His voice was calm, but carried an edge of defiance as he agreed with her. Suddenly, the sword in his hand began to glow, emitting a brilliant blue aura that illuminated the darkness around them. The demon king's smirk faltered, her confidence giving way to shock and disbelief. She demanded to know what he was doing, her voice trembling with panic. Frey stood tall, gripping the sword with steady hands. A faint smirk played on his lips as he explained that his plan was simple: to perish alongside her. By doing so, he would open a path to save the world he had destroyed. The aura around the sword intensified, crackling with energy that seemed to pulse with his resolve. The demon king's voice rose in disbelief as she tried to comprehend his words. Frey's tone grew stronger, resolute and triumphant, as he declared his intentions. The energy surrounding him surged uncontrollably, and as his plan unfolded, the light consumed everything. Then there was only darkness. Frey jolted awake, drenched in sweat. His breath came in ragged gasps as he sat up, trying to steady himself. Slowly, his surroundings came into focus. He glanced around the large, familiar room and muttered to himself that there was no doubt this was his home. Swinging his legs over the side of the bed, he slipped on his shoes and stood. He walked over to the desk where a calendar lay and picked it up with trembling hands. As his eyes scanned the date, he murmured in disbelief that it was the day before he had enrolled in the academy. Realization dawned on him, and his eyes gleamed with recognition. Calling out to the system, he watched as a glowing screen materialized before him. The text on the screen read, "The fate of someone who once destroyed the world as a true villain. A path to save the world opens. Pretend to be a villain and save the world. If you succeed, unparalleled happiness will come to you." Frey's gaze lingered on the words, and a bittersweet smile crossed his lips. He whispered to himself that this was the reward for destroying the world with his own hands and dying alongside the Demon King. Overcome with emotion, he tore the calendar page from its place. Tears welled in his eyes as he made a solemn vow. This time, he would save everyone. The narrative shifted 10 years into the past. A young Frey Raon, barely 10 years old, walked alongside his father, clutching his hand tightly. He glanced curiously at a set of strange symbols on an old parchment they carried. Innocently, he asked his father what the worm-like letters meant. His father smiled down at him and explained that they were called Kania, a script only readable by those who carried the bloodline of the heroic House of Starlight. Frey's curiosity deepened, and he began to ask why, but his voice trailed off as his father's tone grew more serious. "We've arrived at the entrance," his father said, his voice filled with an unmistakable finality. Frey looked around nervously, his eyes wide with confusion. "Why should I go alone? What's going to happen?" he asked, panic creeping into his voice. Kneeling before him, his father placed a firm hand on his small shoulders. "Stand firm, Frey," he said gently. "You've heard of the prophecy circulating in the Empire, haven't you?" Frey nodded hesitantly, recalling the familiar tale. "When the Demon King vanishes, their successor will appear 1,000 years later. The world will be in peril, but a new hero will rise to save it," he recited, his young voice uncertain. His father nodded, his expression grave. "Yes, that is the prophecy known to the Empire. But there's another part, one that is passed down only within our family." Frey's heart skipped a beat. "Another part?" he asked nervously. His father's voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with significance. "It says that 1,000 years after the Demon King's defeat, the successors of both the Demon King and the hero will appear. That 1,000 years is exactly now." The weight of his father's words hung in the air, and Frey's young mind raced to comprehend the destiny that awaited him. Frey stepped forward and entered the room his father had indicated. As the door clicked shut behind him, a wave of isolation washed over him. He banged on the door, calling out for his father in desperation, but no response came. His voice echoed in the silence. Suddenly, a light emanated from a pedestal in the center of the room, drawing his attention. Frey gasped in surprise as he saw it, the legendary hero's sword, glowing with an otherworldly aura. He hesitated for a moment before stepping closer, his hand slowly reaching out to touch it. Just as his fingers neared the blade, a stern voice commanded him to stop. "That's still too much for you to handle," the voice said firmly. Startled, Frey jumped back and turned to see a man standing before him. His eyes narrowed as he stumbled back, blurting out, "Who the hell are you?" The man scowled, his expression full of irritation. "You don't even recognize the face of your ancestor?" Frey blinked in confusion, then frowned. "Ha! That's strange. My ancestor was supposed to be a handsome man, wasn't he? The man's face tightened with annoyance. Kid, do you want to throw hands? Taken aback, Frey remained silent. The man sighed, rolling his eyes. Anyway, you came here to learn how to conquer this world, didn't you? Frey shook his head, still bewildered. Conquer? Nah, I just came because my father told me I had to if I wanted to save my friends. The man pointed at him with a knowing look. That's part of conquering too, so you're not wrong. His expression grew serious as he continued. Listen closely. The world you live in, it's like hard mode. No, it's worse. It's a bad ending. Frey's eyes widened at the ominous tone. The man stepped closer and placed a hand on Frey's face. Seeing is believing, he said grimly. Pain exploded in Frey's head as his vision blurred. He screamed, collapsing to the ground as the world around him twisted and warped. Images flashed before his eyes. His friends, their faces lifeless and broken, one after another. His heart sank, a cold dread gripping him as he realized what he was seeing. This is the world you'll face if you take the wrong path, the man's voice echoed in his mind. A world filled with despair. Frey lay trembling on the ground, gasping for air as the horrifying vision subsided. His body shook with shock and tears streamed down his face. The weight of what he had witnessed pressed heavily on him. The man stood over him, his expression cold and unreadable, though an understanding of the moment flickered beneath his gaze. Finally, he broke the silence, his tone sharper than before. Now, tell me your choice. Tears continued to streak Frey's face as he slowly looked up, his eyes filled with sorrow and determination. I'll do it, he whispered hoarsely. Just like my ancestor, I'll protect everyone I love. The man's demeanor softened slightly and he nodded. All right, I'll teach you the only path to reach the happy ending. Stepping forward, he placed a hand gently on Frey's face. The only way to save yourself, your loved ones, and the world. But let me warn you, it's by no means an easy path. The flashback concluded, leaving Frey with the weight of its final words echoing in his mind. You must destroy the world with your own hands and die with the Demon King. Once you enter the hidden route, new trials will await you. But don't lose heart. This is the only way. Returning to the present, Frey spoke to himself with quiet determination. He was ready to pursue the path toward the happy ending. While much remained unchanged from before, one crucial difference gave him hope. The presence of the system. This new ability, he thought, would be essential in the challenges ahead. It resembled the prophecy book he had read as a child. Frey felt confident. At this level, he believed he could manage even his first attempt on the route shown to him by his ancestor. The system had also provided him with methods to master its use, and he knew that if he succeeded, he could protect a world where everyone could live in peace. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. A familiar voice called out, "Young master, it's Kanya. May I come in?" Frey smiled faintly and told her to enter, thinking to himself that after struggling so much to get to this point, perhaps he could afford a moment to breathe. The system had completed its update, and as Kanya stepped into the room, Frey noticed something he hadn't seen in a long time. Her smile. It brought back memories of their shared childhood. Suddenly, the system screen turned red, displaying a chilling message. The path of the false villain. If you commit acts of evil that led to the destruction of the world in your previous life, the system will force you to repeat such acts. There is a penalty for good deeds. Your life force will be severely diminished if discovered. These restrictions are essential for conquering the hidden route. The system elaborated that points could be earned through evil actions which could then be spent on essential items or skills. Before Frey could process this, the system flashed another warning. Kanya retains memories from the previous cycle. Frey froze, the revelation shocking him to his core. As Kanya entered the room, her gaze pierced through him with pure hatred. He trembled, feeling a surge of fear as he whispered, "What is this murderous intent?" He quickly recalled what the system had revealed. Kanya, his butler, was one of the 5 heroines mentioned in the prophecy. Cursed from birth with dark magic that drained her life force, she had suffered deeply under his previous actions. A vivid memory surfaced, one he now regretted deeply. His voice cold and mocking as he had said to her, "Having no parents doesn't make you special. Do you want to be kicked out too?" He had punctuated his cruelty by stepping on her head. Realizing the magnitude of his mistake, Frey panicked. She could kill me at any moment, he thought. Kanya broke the tense silence, her voice unnervingly calm. "Young master, will you be dining now?" Frey nodded nervously, struggling to steady his voice. "Ah, yeah, just bring me the usual." Her glare didn't waver. With a tone heavy with disdain, she replied, "Understood," before turning sharply and leaving the room, slamming the door behind her. The loud thud reverberated through the room as Frey sat frozen in place. consumed by dread. The realization that Kanya, along with the other heroines, retained their memories from the previous cycle was a twist he hadn't anticipated, and one that could jeopardize everything. Frey trembled as dread coursed through him. He muttered to himself that Kanya's cold, unflinching gaze left no doubt. She remembered everything. His thoughts spiraled as he admitted he had no idea what was happening, but knew he needed to prepare. Just then, the system sent a notification. Strong murderous intent detected nearby. Frey scoffed under his breath, muttering, "Murderous intent! Thanks for stating the obvious. I've been feeling plenty of that already. What's new now?" The system's early detection skill allowed him to identify threats once a day, but at level 1 it was far from reliable. He anxiously noted that the current target was Kanya. If she kills me, her own master, she won't escape the consequences. So why would she risk it? He wondered aloud. Despite his reasoning, he couldn't ignore the possibility that her hatred for him ran so deep she might act regardless of the cost. Suddenly, a chilling aura emanated from the door. Kanya's voice broke through the tension as she announced, "I've brought your soup, young master." Frey's mind raced. She must have cursed the food with dark magic to ensure my untimely end, he thought. As he took the bowl from her, she bowed politely and said, "Enjoy your meal." Looking at her composed demeanor, Frey felt a pang of guilt. But to someone like her, who remembered everything, he was nothing but trash. Fine, he thought. If she wanted to play this game, he would have to make his move first. "Wait," he said abruptly. Kanya turned back, her expression neutral, but Frey's voice rose in anger. "Who told you to bring me this? I asked for a sandwich instead." He hurled the soup bowl toward her. She barely dodged it, startled by his sudden outburst. The system immediately notified him. "You have earned 1 false villain point." Kanya, visibly shaken, replied quickly, "All right, I'll bring it right away," before running out and slamming the door behind her. Frey let out a sigh of relief, his hands trembling as the tension momentarily eased. A few minutes later, Kanya returned with the sandwich he requested. Frey inspected it carefully, noticing a faint cursed aura surrounding it. "There's no cheese in it," he complained. "Remake it." Kanya tried to respond, but he cut her off with a sharp glare. "Are you talking back to me?" he barked. She shook her head nervously. "No, young master," she replied, retreating to prepare another dish. When she returned with a new sandwich, Frey continued to find fault, making increasingly absurd demands. Each cruel comment earned him more false villain points from the system. By the 8th attempt, Kanya was visibly drained, her steps unsteady as she handed him yet another sandwich. Frey observed her, his thoughts racing. "You're surprisingly persistent, aren't you?" Despite her exhaustion, she had remade the dish over and over until her magic was nearly depleted. Finally, Frey took the sandwich and brought it close to his mouth. Kanya's expression shifted slightly. Was that a hint of relief? But just as quickly, Frey tossed the sandwich aside. "Actually, I think I'll just have the soup from earlier," he said coldly. Kanya fell to her knees, her body trembling from exhaustion. Frey stared at her blankly and ordered, "Remake it again." Though she staggered to her feet, her body gave out and she collapsed. Frey instinctively reached out, catching her by the arm before she hit the ground. Frey smiled faintly as he patted Kanya's head. "What a cruel twist of fate," he murmured. "I wish I could have laughed with you, even just for a little while." Gently, he placed her on the bed, his gaze darkening with thought. "Earning points is more life-threatening than I expected." Letting out a sigh, he continued, "For now, I need to replenish Kanya's life force before things get worse." The only way to stabilize her dark magic was to fill her cursed body with someone else's life force. As he transferred his own to her, a sharp pain shot through him. He clenched his jaw and muttered, "I won't live long anyway, so using my life to keep her alive seems like the better option." Once the process was complete, he let out a weary sigh. "Now, I need a strategy to deal with this ridiculous situation. The original plan is no longer an option." Picking up the calendar from his desk, he traced the dates with his finger. Approximately 2 months remain until the main quest begins. Until then, I'll need to keep a low profile and prepare quietly without drawing attention. He sighed again, frustration weighing on him. Starting off with something that wasn't even in the prophecy, give me a break. There were still 4 other main heroines besides Kanya. One of them was his travelling fiancée, but she didn't require immediate attention for now. That left Princess Clanna, who had been abandoned by the royal family. She currently had no power to act against him, meaning she wasn't a major threat. The real problems, however, were Irina and Frey, two people he would encounter frequently at the academy. Saintess Frey was naive and blindly followed the church, but one wrong move around her could socially ruin him. Irina, on the other hand, was reckless and impulsive. If she remembered the previous cycle, she might kill him on sight, without hesitation. Then there was Kanya. Since her sister was being held hostage, she wouldn't outright kill him, but that didn't mean he was safe. Frey clenched his fists. I have to gather false villain points no matter the cost. Without enough power or survival skills, I'll be killed quickly. The points he earned from Kanya alone were limited. The higher the risk, the faster he could accumulate them. If he increased his interactions with the heroines and used the information from the prophecy book wisely, he might be able to survive. I'll try to organize everything by tomorrow, he decided. Then, the real battle begins after I enroll in the academy. Later that morning, Frey sat on the floor, realizing he had been so absorbed in studying the prophecy book that dawn had already arrived. He glanced at Kanya, still lying unconscious, and muttered to himself, "Guess I should wake her up now." With great effort, he lifted her and placed her on the floor, grumbling under his breath, "She's too heavy." Sighing deeply, he straightened himself. It was time to resume his act as the villain. Looking down at her, he took a deep breath before shouting, "Hey, how long do you plan to sleep?" Kanya woke abruptly at the sudden noise, her expression cold as she shot Frey a disdainful look. He sneered in response. "What's with that face? Got something to complain about?" She remained silent as she stood, her demeanor stiff. "Today's the first day at the academy, isn't it?" he continued. "Hurry up and prepare the carriage." "As you wish," she replied curtly before turning on her heel and slamming the door behind her. Frey sighed, shaking his head. That poor door, it didn't deserve that. Turning his attention to the system interface, he frowned. "Still only 100 points. Looks like I need at least a few hundred to buy anything useful." His gaze drifted to the window, where he caught a glimpse of Kanya outside. He muttered under his breath, "Guess I'll just have to keep earning them bit by bit if I don't want to die." Then, with a dry smirk, he added, "This is going to be such a fun academy life." Later at the academy, students gathered around Frey, showering him with praise for his entrance ceremony speech. They poured him a glass of wine while some of the noble girls vied for his attention. Frey chuckled to himself. "I am renowned for my talent and beauty, after all." Their intentions, however, were all too transparent. One student stepped forward, a practiced smile on his face. "Lord Frey, we'd like to propose placing our products in the royal palace. We've also brought some commoner women for your enjoyment." Frey took a slow sip of his wine, pretending to consider the offer. "I'll decide after I see your sincerity," he replied smoothly. Inwardly, he sighed. Money and women, is that all these people care about? His grip tightened on his fork as he violently stabbed a piece of meat on his plate. "It's not the Demon King I want to deal with. These rotten nobles. I'd love to do something about them too, but now wasn't the time. If he wanted to earn more points, he had to keep playing along with these people." Just then, a commotion broke out across the hall. "Gah! You unruly woman!" a voice shouted. "Here you go," a girl's voice screamed in return. Frey's eyes snapped toward the scene. One of the students from earlier was dragging a red-haired girl by the hair, shoving her forward with a smug grin. "We brought you some women to enjoy," he announced. Frey's heart clenched as recognition hit him. "No way! Irina?" Her body was bruised, her breathing uneven, panic flared in his chest. How did she get caught? Irina was a prodigy in elemental magic, specializing in fire. No ordinary noble should have been able to subdue her. Then it clicked. She let herself get captured. She's planning to take everyone out at once. His mind raced. If she unleashed her magic now, the entire banquet hall would be reduced to ashes, him included. Without hesitation, he accessed the system, scrolling frantically through the available skills. His heart pounded as his eyes locked onto an upgrade, a defense boost that could protect a target from a fatal blow once. He didn't think twice. He bought it instantly. Frey walked toward Irina, the earlier points he had earned from Kanya proving useful in this tense situation. He could feel the weight of the moment as he closed the distance between them. Irina gritted her teeth, barely containing her rage. Suddenly, a system notification flashed before Frey's eyes. Rose mana has been depleted. His eyes widened. Mana depletion? He thought. A genius like Irina? Is she storing up her mana to unleash it all at once? Just then, her furious voice rang through the air. "You filthy bastards won't get away with this," she spat. The man still gripping her hair sneered. "Vulgar woman, your only purpose is to please us, so shut up and get lost," Frey interrupted, his tone cold and sharp. The man blinked in confusion. What did you just say? Frey's patience snapped. He hurled his wine glass at the wall, shattering it into pieces. I said get lost. I'm busy playing with the woman, he snarled. The two men exchanged nervous glances before scrambling away, laughing crudely as they told Frey to enjoy himself. As the room cleared, Frey let out a wicked laugh and roughly grabbed Irina's chin. Let's have some fun in a quieter place, he murmured. Irina's eyes burned with disgust. What a vile man, she hissed. If I knew this would happen, I would have used my ultimate magic on you instead of the Demon King's army. Frey smirked, his fingers brushing against her skin. First, I'll teach you to shut that arrogant mouth of yours. Irina shut her eyes, her mind racing. Damn it! I got caught right before midnight, but when she opened them again, she found Frey slumped on the floor, completely passed out from drinking. A girl nearby, visibly relieved, whispered, "Looks like he's out cold. Let's escape!" Quickly, as they fled, another girl muttered, "We're lucky. I heard that if you get caught, your fate is horrible. He's the kind of noble who sees commoners as nothing but slaves." Once they were gone, Frey cracked open his eyes, scanning the empty room. Confirming that no one was around, he let out a sigh of relief. That reckless act was only possible because of the emergency defense boost, he thought. He checked the time. As the clock struck midnight, the emergency defense boost vanished. Just then, another system notification popped up.
Target Irina. Status Curse of Midnight.
His eyes narrowed as he read the details. The Curse of Midnight declares death for the target at 12 p.m. the next day. It can be used once a year. The caster remains in a state of mana depletion for a year. Exhaling in relief, he muttered. In other words, that was a close call. As she approached, her cold, calculating gaze fixed on him. In a detached tone, she addressed him as Master, noting that he shouldn't be sleeping in a place like this. Without waiting for a response, she helped him to his feet. Frey smirked and lightly poked her cheek. "I can't walk right now, so carry me," he said, his voice laced with amusement. Kania's eyes narrowed in irritation, but she didn't argue. Instead, she silently hoisted him onto her back and started walking. "If you were always this cooperative, that'd be nice," Frey murmured, momentarily distracted by the thought. Under her breath, Kania muttered, "Frey, you're still insufferable." Her words caught him off guard. "What?" His heart skipped a beat in surprise. Before he could process it, her voice turned ice cold. "If it weren't for my sister, I wouldn't be putting up with you right now." Frey's eyes widened as memories of Kania's sister surfaced. He recalled moments from their childhood. The time she had given him a present with a bright smile, or when he had climbed a tree to retrieve her hat, only to fall and injure his arm despite their warnings. Kania's chilling voice snapped him back to reality. "Wait for me, Frey. Once I've ensured my sister's safety, I'll settle things with you."